Welcome to Carpet Talk, a safe place where we process and discuss walking with Jesus. Join us on the carpet.
Hello, welcome to Carpet Talk. My name is Angel.
And I'm Timmy.
And today, really exciting, we have a professor from Concordia coming here to talk to us a little bit about psychology and what it means to follow Jesus in like a kind of mental health and emotional health kind of way.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited for this. I love psychology. It's just so good to see how the mind works and having a professor who knows about these things.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I'm a psychology, that's my major, so I love hearing about these things and was really interested in it. So
who's the professor?
Yeah, so Dr. Yndo is the person we're talking to today, and she's a professor in psychology. So
Hello, Dr. Yndo.
It's good to see you.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Well, we're so glad that you're here with us, and we just want to say thank you for making the time to be here. How have you been? How's just life been? Busy? No? Calm? What season are you in right now?
It's definitely a busy season.
Yeah.
It's definitely a busy season. I just got back on Sunday from Honduras.
Okay.
Mission trip.
Wow.
And then Tuesday I had to drive to San Antonio. My dad got back surgery. So that actually went well, praise God.
Thank God, yeah.
And then, teaching classes all in between.
Wow.
So.
How was that mission trip? Your dad's doing good, you said?
He's doing really well.
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
It's pretty intense, but he's on the other side of it, so that's good.
Okay, we pray for quick recovery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. How was the Honduras mission trip? How'd that go?
It was really good. I've gone on this trip before. I actually brought a bunch of nursing students with me, or nursing alumni with me the last time. It was 6 of us all from Concordia. 6 or 7. And it was good. I went back this time with one of the nurses from Concordia. And what we do is we go with a medical team, and we hire locals to also join our medical team. So we have local doctors, local dentists. And we're going to this area in Honduras called Chimalacon. And Chimalacon it used to be called like murder capital of the world. We just by accident ended up there. They were calling Pastor Jose, and it was not the Pastor Jose that they thought they were calling. And so we are kind of unique in that we're the only ones who serve Chimalacon.
Wow.
So lots of missions go to Honduras, but not a lot go to this community. We bring a whole medical team, so wound care, blood sugar care, medications, a vision clinic, so readers and distance, and then dentists.
That's amazing.
And so
that is so cool.
It's really cool. I really like that we hire the locals. We work with locals, and we set up. Yeah. And we couldn't do it without the community. So I have like a translator. She's like my bestie. She's always by my side while I'm there. And since this is my second time, I got to work with her again. But it's really amazing. I love seeing how God moves in that space and how we're able to serve the community. The first day, like 900 people came to the clinic.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And they all pretty much come by foot. Because we set up right at the elementary school or the churches in the community.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool.
That's amazing. What a wonderful experience to just see that and go on mission. What does kind of daily going on mission what does that look like for you?
Do you mean daily there or daily at home?
Daily, more at home. Yeah,
more at home.
Going on mission somewhere else is such it's a huge thing. But I think sometimes as Christians, we forget to be where we are in mission. So yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. How do I live missionally at home? And I think that I have really been thinking about this. There's a book called Surprise the World, and it's about how do I be a missional person. And someone just introduced it to me, so I can't talk a lot about it. But it's on the book list, what to read next. Yeah. But I think for me, it's very much relationships, right? So I know that I'm going to Honduras, and we're doing this cool thing for the community, and then I leave. And then I hope to come back. And what I like about this mission group is that they come back. But how do I keep the opportunity to introduce Jesus kind of alive with my friends back in Honduras? And it's building relationships. So I think building relationships is really how I am aiming to live missionally, because that's how you kind of build trust first, and I can introduce you to something that's new to you only after I first build relationship,
Yeah.
especially something that's new to you, like Jesus, that can be like controversial for people that okay, if Jesus exists, then why is there poverty? Then why do you have to go to Chimelacon, right? Like things
Wow.
like that. So I think that the relationship first is really important.
That's so good. While you were saying that, a thought came to my head. And when we think about building relationships with people, a lot of anxiety can come with that. Yeah. It's like, what would I say to them? How can I approach them? And that's all part of also like making disciples in the world where we have to go out there. We have to get out of our comfort zone to do those things and build those trust and bond and all of that. And I heard recently that anxiety and joy cannot coexist. And I'm like just wondering, what do you think about how we can conquer that anxiety and make building relationships with people and going forward with like making disciples for God more of a joyful thing than an anxiety area? I don't know if that makes sense. I can
that
reword
makes
it.
a lot of sense. So they say that the brain region that deals with anxiety is the same brain region that deals with gratitude. And so it reminds me of that verse. It's like, worry about nothing, instead be thankful. I was not raised in the church, so I don't know all the specific verses, but y'all might know those. And so it is hard to have both of those emotions, gratitude and anxiety, at the same time. So I encourage you when you're feeling anxious, right? Like right now, I could be anxious. You're recording this. And you're calling it the carpet talk. We're not even on the carpet. It feels wrong.
I know.
But then I'm just thankful that I get the opportunity to have this interaction with you. And that kind of makes that anxiety subside. I think also anytime that we're talking about someone and our intention is to disciple, or we hope that we can build relationship to disciple, there is some anxiety, right? They're going to judge me. They're going to evaluate me. And I think reminding yourself that if you are going to be used in this person's story to bring them to the Lord, then He will give you the words and He will give you the wisdom. And so anytime I enter a conversation where the expectation for me or my hope is that I will help to disciple them or in some way, my prayer is like, Lord, give me the words, because I don't have them, right? Like it's not, I can't save them. That would be silly, right?
Yeah.
The Lord saves them. So
Yeah.
help me be somehow helpful in that for you, Lord. And I think that praying that way and thinking of it that way is really important, because I make myself smaller in that way, and my impact is smaller because God's impact is big, and we know that, and we believe that. So it feels better that way. Does that make sense?
Very humbling.
Yeah, I love that aspect of humility and coming into these relationships with people and just humbling yourself and saying, hey, this isn't about what I'm doing. It's about what God is doing and working through this. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
The first time I had to evangelize on a mission trip, I was like, this is a lot of pressure. I've never done this. Can't you get the pastor to do this? And what if I say something wrong, was what someone said. And it was when they said it that I was like, oh, it doesn't matter, right? Like you can't say anything wrong. If you have good intentions, you'll do your best, right?
Yeah.
But you're not going to stop someone from having salvation, right? And so I think that when I told them, I realized, well, I probably can't mess it up that bad either then.
Yeah.
And I think that was helpful.
Great
Yeah.
reassurance.
Yeah.
And it takes off that pressure, because I feel like, especially with newbie Christians, we tend to all just think, oh, it's my job to like get them there, get them saved, bring them to church,
Convert
all
them,
of this.
yeah.
Yes.
If I'm convincing enough, I can save their soul.
yeah.
Right? And that's just, no.
not true.
Yeah, not at all.
And I know that this is, with like my friends and I, we call it, what's it called? Missionary dating.
Missionary dating.
Missionary dating. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of it, but I can guess what it is.
It's like you meet someone who's maybe they're not that deep in faith, and you think, oh, if I start dating them, I can bring them closer to God, and like putting that on yourself, saying I can help save them just so we can be together in the future. How do you like, and I know this is something that I'm not sure if it makes sense, but how do you not think like that? And what's like an advice you can give to people who probably have that mindset right now, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep talking to them until I can help them get closer to Christ. I can help them come to salvation and stuff. Like, especially with high schoolers and college students even, this is a very common thing I've seen. And I just don't know how to give that advice of like, hey, this is what path you should take, or this is what you should focus on mainly, instead of, does that make sense?
I think I get what you're saying.
Okay, I don't know how else to word it.
I think it's nice when you're like, oh, like maybe I can introduce them to Jesus. That would be really cool. I think you need to separate what you want from what they want and what the Lord wants to, right? Like, am I just trying to make them Christian? And if their faith is not real, but it's attached to our relationship, what will happen if our relationship ends? Right? And I think thinking about all of those things, like, what is your intention here? Is your intention just so you can have do you want them to be Christian just so you can have a relationship? Or do you want them to be Christian because you love them and are worried about their soul? And maybe that should take priority over the relationship.
Yeah.
But I think that's a hard one. I think you really have to be self-aware. Like, what is my intention? Why am I doing this? Why am I wanting this person to go with me to church? Is it for them, for me, for their soul, for the Lord, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And kind of putting, if it is fueled by like selfish desire to have a relationship, you have to maybe reconsider how you want to approach that.
Yeah, that's
stuff.
really great.
Yeah.
So obviously you are a psychology professor at Concordia. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and how you got into that and started doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started going to school, I'm first gen. And my mom was like, you're going to be a judge. And my dad was like, you're just going to college. And I was like, cool, I'll do some of that. So I went to college and I did major in criminal justice. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer. When I was younger, I loved to argue, which is strange because that's the last thing I want to do now. Yeah, I'm like, let's not argue. Let's agree to disagree.
There you go.
We don't have to agree for me to love you. And that's fine. When I was younger, I was like, no, you're going to agree with me. And I'll fight you to the death on it, right?
All or nothing.
But when I was getting that criminal justice degree, thinking that I would be a lawyer, I realized across time I don't really like to argue. It's probably myself maturing and getting older and being okay with differing perspectives. But also I was struggling in that degree because I was really concerned about juvenile delinquency. I was like, the babies, we got to save the babies and protect the babies. How are they ending up in all this trouble? And I was finding that a lot of the stuff I was learning was like, they're children, right? And we are here to protect them. And children are often a product of their environment. So how can we help children? And I was getting just a lot of information about laws and not a lot of information about anything else besides laws, right? So I decided to pick up the psychology degree because I wanted to know more about how our environment shapes us. And so I picked up the psychology degree. And at some point in there, I pivoted to when it was time to go to graduate school. I said, I think I'm going to do psych and not crim. And then I did not ever think that I was going to be a professor. I thought I was going to do research or counseling. When I was working on my PhD, when I was working on my master's degree, actually, I was asked to teach a class. And I was like, this is it. This is where it's at for me. I love teaching. I get to work with young people. Again, my passion early on was young people. And so that's pretty much how I ended up doing psychology.
Wow.
Was that your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
cool.
that's awesome.
Sometimes
That's great.
I go off.
No,
you're
I
good.
love that.
Every second of it was great. So we all tend to, well, I don't know about you guys, but personally, I tend to forget that mental health is a whole thing. And before I even came to Concordia, I believe that having a strong faith should be enough instead of like, I think I didn't separate mental health versus spiritual health. So to me, it was all one thing. But now that I understand more of that, I think, how do we separate those things, and how can we know when it's time to use the resources that God is giving us to help our mental health?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And I think for a long time, I struggled even with how do I answer this question. I think that when we approach health, we should approach it like holistically, right? We have our mental health, we have our spiritual health, we have our physical health. And when one is not doing well, we feel it elsewhere, right? So when I got in a car accident, my chronic back pain, I start feeling sad about it, right? So then I'm starting to feel depressed. I'm upset about the car accident. And then I'm like, why did this happen? So then my spiritual health starts suffering too, right? Like, health is so connected. Everything is so connected. So we should think of them all together, not individually. You're a whole human being. You have all of those parts. To be healthy, includes all of those parts, right? But when we're talking about when is it time to get help, right, for mental health stuff, when do you cross the line beyond prayer, I guess, is, I think, a good example. A lot of times people talk about praying it away. I would pray for my schoolwork, that the Lord would give me the words to complete my assignment. But if I didn't then sit at the computer and type or do the research to get my paper written, then it was just empty. My prayer was empty, right? It was asking for a miracle, which the Lord does provide miracles, but I should also try to do my part. And so if you're struggling with, I'm thinking anxiety, yes, you should absolutely pray about it. And if things aren't getting better, you should reach out to people, because that's the next resource you have, right? You should meditate, you should journal, you should do the things that you can do. But if the next thing is medication, and that's, the Lord has provided that, right? We are his hands and feet. Someone went and made that medication as and provides it for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think even they gave me anti-parasite meds when I left Honduras.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, should I take this now as a prevention, or should I take this after I have worms?
Yeah.
Or should I, because it's legitimately for worms, right?
Yeah.
Last time I came back, I was actually sick for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, but I could just pray about it, or I can use something that was given to me by people who love God and who love me, right? It was my team that gave it to me. They're like, take it, Or do I just pray that if I get worms, they'll go away?
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to pray, but I should also use my resources. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, that reminds me of like a story of this guy who was he was standing on like a house, and everything was flooded around him, and he was kind of in danger, and he was like praying to God. He's like, Lord, I need you to save me, like take me from this place so I can be saved. And so then a helicopter came by and like landed, and he was like, no, I don't need you, God's gonna save me. And then a boat came by, and he's like, no, God's gonna save me. And then eventually he drowned, and he went to heaven, and it's like, God, why didn't you save me? It's like, dude, I sent you a plane and a boat, and you didn't listen. So I absolutely think that like we need to rely on the things God
Yeah.
is giving us as part of like what he's doing to help us go through these things that we're asking him for. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome.
So good.
Yes, definitely a good example.
Yeah.
For sure.
And a last question we kind of like to ask all of our guests that come on is, what does it look like to be a disciple maker with Jesus? Basically, like, as we follow Jesus, Jesus calls us to be disciples, but he then calls us to make disciples of all nations. So in your life, how, or as a professor, how has that looked for you?
How has that looked for me? I'm looking at your question, 'cause I'm like, oh, that was a long question. So how am I discipling and making disciples,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly.
Okay. I think it goes back to relationships, right? You build relationship with people, and when things get really bad, you're who they want to talk to. Who is this God that you trust so much, right? Because things are not good for me, and so maybe you can pray for me now, right? And then maybe things turn around. Maybe things worked out the way that they'd never expect after our conversation or before or sometime, and then they are now curious about this God, right? And so the next time something like that happens with someone they know, they are uniquely equipped to talk to them about that, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I think of people that have had like a horrible breakup, and they're like, it was just the worst thing I've ever experienced. And I'm like, I hope that you pray about it, right? The Lord loves you. And, breakups are extremely hard, but you are not alone. You are not abandoned. Like, the Lord is always with you, and he loves you, and it's not an earthly love. It's like this beautiful heavenly love. And so think about that, and they start feeling like this weird peace beyond understanding, right? And then it happens to someone they know. They're uniquely equipped. They've gone through an equally as traumatizing and horrible breakup to say to the next person, you know what? My breakup was bad like that too, right? So I don't think everything happens for a reason, but I think that we can use those things.
Yeah.
And so, but we don't know if we don't have relationship.
Yeah, I love how much
Wow.
you just rely on Jesus and say, like, dude, he loves you so much, and
Yeah.
look at what he did for you, and just relying on the gospel of that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, I can't love them like that. Like, I'm human,
Yeah.
right? So it is, I want to remind them of our Heavenly Father who can, who
That's
does.
so good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here
Honestly.
and talking with us and giving us some wonderful insight. That was amazing. Thank you so
Really,
much for
I
sharing.
truly appreciate everything you just said. I am very grateful for that.
Thank y'all so much for having me.
Yeah.
We appreciate your vulnerability.
Yeah. Take us home, Sammy.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this, and we are super, super privileged to be able to speak to you and hear all these things and share it with you. And we hope that you share it with people that you know. And on next episode, we have Dr. Elena Jackson, so keep an eye out for that. Anything to share, Angel?
No, that's all. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on the carpet.
Welcome to Thank You.
Yeah.
See you
welcome
later.
to Thank you. See you guys.
Thank y'all.